Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Tim's presentation on the Re-Open Saskatchewan Plan and what this means for Saskatchewan's recreation facilities. The presentation will begin shortly. I'm not Tim Hanna. I am Christian Bates-Hardy, Communications Consultant with Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association, and I will be providing some technical support to Tim in today's webinar. I want to thank you for joining us today. I can see we have currently 170 people in with us at the webinar, and it looks like we had about 218 people in total register for today's session. So a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you're just joining us for the first time, we are the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association, and we provide leadership, support, and services that contribute to recreation's impact on the quality of life for people in Saskatchewan. We manage the recreation section of the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust for sport, culture, and recreation. And we have a main office in Regina with field offices throughout the province. And you can learn more about us online at spra.sk.ca. Feel free to ask questions today in the webinar. You'll see that there is an option for you to ask a question of Tim by using the question box. And if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please feel free to use this question box to communicate that with us. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Tim's presentation today is going to be between 45 minutes to an hour. We've got 90 minutes in today's presentation, so we have about a half an hour time depending for questions at the end of the presentation. But again, because there are 218 of you registered today, we might not get to all of your questions, but we hope to answer as many as we can. So once again, feel free to use that question box to ask questions, and we hope we can answer them for you today. And I'm going to turn things over to Tim now so we can begin the presentation.
Thank you, Christian, for that introduction. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my screen?
Yes, I can, Tim.
Okay, perfect. As Christian said in the opening, we're really going to start the conversation today. And please recognize that where we're at is certainly unprecedented times. And, you know, you'll likely have more questions and we'll have answers, but it's important for us to document those questions. So in the following days and weeks, we can try to get as many answers as we can to those questions that you in the field may have. Please note that the slides will be available, and same with the recording. So if you miss something, don't be afraid. It'll be available either in the slides or in the recorded version. So I have to thank the Lakeland District at the beginning, because really this presentation was inspired by a request from them about a week and a half ago to put on something that can provide some additional information to practitioners. So again, thank you to our friends at Lakeland District for sort of inspiring us to put this forward. I would also like to thank you for participating today. And also I'd like to thank our team at SPRA for their help and assistance in putting this presentation together. And please recognize that SPRA, as Christian mentioned, we have field consultants scattered throughout the province, so they're an excellent resource. So through these trying times, don't be afraid to seek their advice and assistance as well. Where are we at with COVID-19? Well, again, as I mentioned, we're in unprecedented times, and the pace of change is really remarkable. We're inundated with information, misinformation, and if you saw the CBC article this morning, even disinformation. Now, what's disinformation, you may ask? Well, it's false or fake information deliberately spread in an attempt to conceal, divide, or disrupt. So it's very difficult right now, and I do appreciate the situation we find ourselves in. There certainly are times of lack of information out there. You know, what do I need right now to make sure my pool is ready for opening, or perhaps my camp? We don't necessarily know all those answers at this point. Consistency, it's hard to be consistent because we see things happening perhaps in other provinces that are maybe approaching reopening a little bit different than our province. And that's, I guess, to be expected. On a national perspective, there are some things happening, especially at CPRA, to help provide some guidance on a national level. And those things are really in the works right now. Short, medium, and long-term outlooks, they're very difficult to predict with any type of accuracy at this point. So what's recreation going to look like in 6 months from now, or perhaps a year from now? It's really difficult to predict. Remember, this presentation may be outdated by the end of the day. That's how quickly information can change. This may be perhaps the most challenging time I can remember for the parks and recreation industry. But from my many decades of experience, I can say this: we are very resourceful and we're very resilient in this industry. So if anyone can come out of this in a good situation, it's our parks and recreation people. SPRA does have the year of government right now. Okay, we're in weekly communication with our province. Okay, we can see through the reopening process that's been happening across not only Canada but in other countries that, you know, parks and recreation is really key in the lives of many individuals. What I would suggest you do, if you have a piece of paper handy, write down 1, 2, and 3, and I hope by the end of the presentation that you'll have 3 takeaways and not just put this presentation on a shelf. That throughout this presentation, you'll be inspired or directed to take 3 action steps. When I offer a facilities course, I preach about these 3 things as being very important for today's recreation practitioner. It's pride in what we do, it's providing quality to our community, and always acting in a professional manner. And perhaps right now, these things are going to be key. So remember to keep calm. It's our time to shine as a parks and recreation industry. Who do we take direction from during this time of crisis? Well, there's certain authorities who are really the experts and or regulators. Federal government comes to mind, our provincial government, and the Saskatchewan Health Authority. So those are regulators, and we have to take our lead from those type of organizations. Information sharing, sort of a liaison or resource between the authorities above and us as practitioners. SPRA would fall into that category where we share information. We try to provide as many updates with the sector as we can as part of our leadership capacity. CPRA, okay, would be another organization, and they're starting to compile information on a national level. And there's probably other organizations out there as well. But please recognize that SPRA is here to provide advice and recommendations to those regulators, but we also have to take direction from them as well. Disclaimer, it's very important that you recognize that the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association does not consider itself an authority on health and safety issues, including those pertaining to COVID. It's the responsibility of our members to determine how to meet or exceed the guidelines provided by the Government of Saskatchewan and the Saskatchewan Health Authority. Workplace health and safety committees should be involved in all planning stages to ensure that local requirements are met. The employer, owner, is responsible for adhering to the most current provincial acts and regulations. So this presentation is really, again, to start that conversation. It's here to provide some guidance, and you'll likely have more questions than answers at this particular point. Where are we at? What's the current state? From a federal perspective, they're stressing caution and keep safety measures in place. For example, physical distancing, hand washing, etc. The provinces are trying to work within that framework to restart our economy and our society. Saskatchewan's Re-Open Plan makes the following comment. Re-Open Saskatchewan is a plan built on a methodical and phased-in approach to slowly and responsibly lift restrictions on business and services. So as a community, we're trying to figure out how this Re-Open Plan is going to be deployed and how best to get on board. Remember, we're not in this alone. There's certainly a large perspective here, but we are in that same boat. And if we're going to get to where we need to be, we need to row in the same direction. But I would caution this, please take COVID-19 and the risk very seriously. Throughout the presentation, you'll see some polling questions, and I think there's 5 in total. So here's the first one that I would ask you to answer, and we'll just give you, maybe 15, 20 seconds to provide your input on this. But how many have you read the Re-Open Saskatchewan Plan? So please take a moment and click on yes or no.
Hey, Tim, Christian here. I just want to let the attendees watching this and participating know that if you're having issues answering the poll, to minimize the presentation and take it out of full screen view. If you're watching this right now in full screen, you may not be able to answer the poll.
Thanks, Christian.
And we're going to give it 15 more seconds before we close the poll. Okay, so Tim, I'm just going to share the results. It looks like 89% said yes, they have read the plan, and 11% said no.
Thanks, Christian, for that. So it looks like the large majority are familiar with the plan. And not only should you be familiar with it, you should probably print a copy off and maybe even keep it in your back pocket. It's a very useful document. The province updates information on the website on a regular basis, so it's a location where you should visit often. So thank you for your input there. But it's good to see that people are reading that plan. Where are we at as a recreation industry at this point? Well, it's a dichotomy. We're supposed to stay isolated, but we need to stay connected. It's through our ingenuity as an industry that we're doing a very good job. And I know districts are having regular virtual meetings and things like that, and it's important. We have more questions than answers right now, and not all the questions will have an answer by the time this is done. Some things will still be up in the air. Key piece is to keep decision makers informed about the current status and short-term challenges. So make sure your council, your board, and others know what's going on. Keep them informed. Resources required to meet public expectations. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about throughout this presentation is what will the new public expectations look like. Social media can play a large role in keeping people informed and sharing information. That's something you may want to get involved with. The internet is another source of valuable information, but again, you have to be careful about what sort of information you're looking for. Speed of change is extraordinary at this point in time. And here's a simple strategy that I would suggest you look at, okay? Stay informed and updated as best as possible. Okay, make sure you're doing your homework, checking things out pretty much on a daily basis. And again, those decision makers really need to know what's going on, and same with your stakeholders. The importance of communication is extremely important. It has to be transparent and it has to be accurate. I would like to reference that the town of Assiniboia has a nice one-page information flyer in regards to recreation, and it's worth having a look at because you can probably do something similar for your community. But I give them high marks for what they've done. We have to keep positive during this as well. It's easy to say the sky is falling, but when I look back to Canada's concert for COVID not too long ago, and I remember Drake was on for some closing remarks, and the one thing that stuck in my mind from his conversation was, look for those silver linings, because that's something that we have to look at. Our second poll question for you to complete is the following. How knowledgeable are your decision makers, and that might be council and or your board, about the status of COVID-19 and its impact on recreation facilities and programs? So again, if you don't mind, if you can take just a few seconds and provide us with your feedback. And again, if you're having trouble, as Christian suggests, just minimize your full screen and then you should be able to complete the poll.
So Tim, it looks like 34% of people who responded have a high level of knowledge, or sorry, their decision makers have a high level of knowledge. 59% have a medium level of knowledge. They know some information and impacts. 5% reported a low level of knowledge, and 2% said not available.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Those are pretty good numbers, to be honest. I know it's difficult, and where do you go for information? But it would be nice, again, if you can, as a practitioner, keep providing information to those decision makers. Our goal is really to move them from the 59% in the medium range to a higher number in the high. They need to be very knowledgeable and they need to be proactive. We certainly can't sit on the sideline at this point. We have to be involved and part of the game. Where are we at with our recreation industry? Timeliness is critical, as information is changing at a rapid pace, as I mentioned earlier. Really, it's our time to start now. There's no sense of waiting, okay? We have to get involved and start our COVID-19 planning. And I know it's difficult since answers and directions are hard to find. And it almost results in a state of paralysis for us, but we have to overcome that. We have operational issues, we have program issues, and it's like Charlie Brown, what do you do? Another thing to consider is don't just assume. Make sure you ask the right authority. So you may have to reach out to someone in the province, for example, or you may have to reach out to someone at the health authority. But you're looking to make sure you get the proper advice. New normal, undoubtedly, both for our facilities and our programs. And perhaps that's the one guarantee I can make today, is the same old business practice we were doing before will certainly not stand the test of time moving forward. Risk and liability is very important to keep in mind. And the term reasonableness, okay, what would a reasonable person do in a situation like this? That's really our standard that we have to live up to. If we stray too far outside what the authorized guidelines suggest we do, it may increase your risk of litigation. So keep that in mind. The onus is on us as recreation practitioners, again, to do our research, share information, and plan for change. And again, from my experience, you can't ask for a better bunch of people that are resourceful and resilient. Parks and Recreation is also change agents. And another point to keep in mind is who knows our community better than people with the Parks and Recreation background? Okay, one thing you may want to take away from this presentation is, I may want to reach out to my insurers to see what sort of advice they would have at this particular point. Or you may want to seek some legal counsel as well. As you're aware, because you've read the plan, there was 5 phases outlined. Phase 1 is enacted. Phase 2 and Phase 3 is coming up shortly. And I won't spend too much time on this particular slide, but again, there's the 5 phases. Your next poll question is, which phase is most relevant to your recreation facilities and programs in your community? So curious to know, is it phase 1? Is it phase 2, phase 3, 4, or 5? So if you can take a moment and complete the poll. And again, you can see on the slide, a best practice is to make sure you have a copy of the Re-Open Plan and make sure you read it. It looks like we have been.
Well, Tim, it looks like 8% of people said phase 3 was most relevant, 87% said phase 4, and 5% said phase 5.
Okay, thanks, Christian. Yeah, certainly phase 4 seems to be the one that has the most impact on recreation. A little bit perhaps in phase 1, 2, and 3, but certainly phase 4 is where the rubber hits the road for most of us. So that's good to know. So we'll talk more about phase 4 in some of the upcoming slides. One thing to note in the Re-Open Plan is there's some consistent measures for all phases. So it doesn't matter if it's the first, fourth, okay, or fifth. There's certain things that have to be done. And I'll go through the list. And the last bullet is probably the most important one. Protective measures for vulnerable populations. Individuals should continue working from home if they can do so effectively. Physical distancing must be maintained whenever possible. Just think how that might apply to, your outdoor pool at this particular point, playgrounds at some point. What about arenas? We really don't know. People must stay at home when they are sick. Vulnerable individuals such as seniors and those with underlying health conditions should continue to exercise caution, minimize high-risk exposures such as public outings. Personal hygiene will continue to be a key preventative measure. And again, this last bullet is very important. Enhanced cleaning and disinfection should take place in workplaces, public spaces, and most notable, recreation facilities. So what's your current level of service now? How is it going to change in the new normal? Okay, new, enhanced, what's that new level of service going to look like? So it's important to start thinking about that. The next slide talks about some further consistent measures for all phases, as indicated by the province. Although the public health order regarding the size of gatherings does not apply to businesses and workplaces, they are expected to follow the recommended public health measures, including physical distancing for staff and clients, regular cleaning and disinfection, frequent hand washing and sanitizing, use of PPE, which is personal protective equipment, where available and appropriate, keeping staff who demonstrate or report COVID-19 symptoms out of the workplace. So those are, again, other measures that the province has noted. So how would this impact, for example, your training program and your health and safety? What sort of procedures and policies do you have, and do they need to be revised and updated? As an employer, we have to provide PPE. So what sort of PPE would you need in let's say, in a pool environment, or a camp environment, or an arena environment? What about the HR issues? There's likely many to consider. But as some of our facilities are operated with a small number of staff, what happens if somebody needs to go into quarantine for 14 days? How would that impact your operation? So there's a lot of things to consider. This is probably a page on the provincial website that you need to be familiar with. Okay, the province is coming out with guidelines as the different phases are starting to open. There's everything on there from environmental cleaning and disinfecting guidelines, appropriate use of PPE guidelines, golf course guidelines, outdoor individual recreation guidelines, parks and campground guidelines, and most recently, gyms and fitness facilities. So right now there's 21 in total, and I'm sure as we get closer to phase 4, there'll be a number of other guidelines issued to help provide direction. So again, this is a particular page on the provincial website that you should be familiar with. So phase 1, I'll quickly go through a few of these things. I won't spend much time because golf courses are, again, sort of in phase 1, and they open back on May 15th, and there's specific guidelines for golf courses to follow, and that's on page 37, okay, of the guide. So make sure you're familiar with that if golf courses are one of the facilities that you're looking after. Another one under phase 1 is outdoor individual recreation. And again, page 39 has some specific guidelines to help the outdoor recreation operators. Community gardens are under phase 1 as well. Okay, and again, they're subject to physical distancing and public gathering restrictions as well. Okay, and they're suggesting that you should take precautionary measures, which includes additional cleaning and disinfection of commonly touched areas, etc. Phase 2, we recently went through that, okay, and just a couple of brief points. Reopening of retail and selected personal care services. Reopening these businesses will allow many small business owners to bring their businesses back online in a safe and efficient manner. And I'm sure you've experienced going into businesses and some of the changes they've made. Okay, everything from locking the front door and you have to sort of knock to get in. They may have a hand washing station when you go in. They may give you a mask. Those are some of the things that, you know, businesses are doing as they ramp up. Phase 3 just announced last week on Thursday that the target date for phase 3 is June 8th. And some of the services affected by this will be restaurant and licensed establishment at a 50% capacity, remaining personal care services that weren't considered in the other phases, places of worship, gyms and fitness facilities are important for our industry, and child care facilities may be as well. Increased gathering sizes, outdoor gatherings are now increased to 30, indoor gatherings are 15 people. So phase 3, what does it mean to us? Well, it's difficult at this point to really identify, but when it talks about reopening childcare facilities, the questions come up, does this include rec programs like summer camps? Okay, and that's a good question. That's something that SPRA is trying to get confirmation on as well. Okay, the province does state that in response to phase 3 that more information will be available this week, okay, for updates on the Re-Open plan. So again, we should get more information from the province this week as we move towards June 8th. The reopening gyms and fitness facilities, does this include multi-purpose spaces, for example? Again, a very good question that was raised by our members, and we're hoping to provide some sort of advice to the province and get some feedback from them as well. Interesting to note that the province stated in the reopening that reopening gyms and fitness facilities promote physical and mental wellness. Of course, we're the choir, so we know that, and it's very important that, you know, people have an opportunity to do recreation. We know it's very important. The province also indicated that, has announced some guidelines for gyms and fitness facilities, and that was released on May 22nd. So again, something that you may want to look into if this is important for your community. Phase 4, again, likely the largest phase with the most impact on community recreation. Okay, it's important to read and know, but right now they're talking about reopening indoor and outdoor recreation and entertainment facilities. And again, we don't have a date at this particular point, so it's very hard to determine. Will there be an increase in the size of public and private gatherings by then too? We honestly don't know. The next bullet down talks about recreation facilities, and there's quite a list here, and I think it's important for me to read it. All recreational and entertainment facilities, including casinos, bingo halls, arenas, curling rinks, swimming pools, municipal parks and playgrounds, galleries, theaters, museums, and similar facilities are included in phase 4. So similar facilities would likely encompass all those other recreation facilities that aren't individually listed. The next bullet's important to note as well. All seasonal programming, camps, recreational, and athletic activities are included in phase 4. All businesses and customers are expected to practice physical distancing, and again, we're looking at probably a change in the size of private gatherings. The keys to note under phase 4 right now is more information will be forthcoming as we get closer to opening. And that's sort of been what the province has been doing as we enter each phase. There's still going to be lots of questions, as I've mentioned a few times already. And expect a series of new guidelines to come out as well that will try to help provide us with some, again, guidance, advice, direction on how we can reopen these recreation facilities and programs. So phase 4, what will we know by then? Well, again, we're getting consistent messaging across the phases. As we enter each phase, we're getting some advice from the province. It's not inclusive, but here's a few things that sort of stand out in my mind. Social distancing will remain. I don't think there's any way to get around that. Cleaning and disinfecting will be a priority, even if programs need to be adjusted to accommodate that. And a good example would be ice rentals, for example, where you have one group on the ice and then there's a quick turnaround and there'll be another group on the ice. Maybe there'll be some time in there for your facility operator to do a cleaning and disinfecting. It's hard to say. Something to consider. Guidelines must be adhered to. Okay, so again, the province is issuing guidelines, and that's, again, they're the regulators in this. So we have to respect and follow those guidelines. As employers, we have a responsibility. We have to make sure that we're looking at our levels of services and that we're making appropriate changes. If you're sick, stay home, and that not only for ourselves, but also our users and our visitors to our facilities. Okay, that'll be very important. How do you track that? You know, will you have to have a portable temperature taker, those kind of things? And there might be limits on the size of gatherings still. Okay, so how can you put on a event and still meet the limits on the size of gatherings? That could be difficult. Phase 5. Well, sooner or later we'll get there. Okay, and I hope it's more sooner than later, but time will certainly tell. One thing, again, I can guarantee is that the new normal will look a lot different than what we were operating as previously. How to move forward? Well, I'm going to talk about specific recreation facilities on a municipal level. Okay, and the reason for that is I don't want to interfere with jurisdictions, other jurisdictions that are involved, such as regional parks. But here's some things to remember. Things are changing again almost daily. Communicate with your decision makers in your community. Make sure it's regular again and transparent. Stay connected. Okay, share ideas with peers and gather best practices. And I'll share some resources as we get towards the end of the presentation. Do your research. Check with those authoritative bodies. Okay, make sure you're up to date on their latest directives. Be ready for change and be proactive. You know it's coming. You can see it down the track. Some facilities and programs may not be delivered this year, and recognize it's not your fault if that's the case. Okay, if you don't have the outdoor pool operating this year because it doesn't fit the timing for phase 4, well, that's okay. Those things happen. Start to create a COVID-19 plan as best as you can for your facilities and programs. Okay, we have time now to do some of this work when our facilities and programs aren't operating. So really, it's a good investment of that time, that energy, and those resources. Just don't sit there idle. Let's look at our first facility, outdoor swimming pools. Right now, they're closed. They fall under phase 4. We don't have a date. We have no idea when they'll be open. Okay, but our goal right now is to aim for a state of readiness. So when the time comes, when we can open our pools, we should be ready to do that. So what can you do now? Well, here's some ideas, and it's not an inclusive list by any means. But your pool equipment, ensure everything's operational and you've had maintenance performed. Make sure it's clean and ready to open. Inventory your chemicals. Look at your test kits, program supplies, etc. So get all that organized. Check with your pool contractor to see what they would recommend at this point. Okay, and that may depend on what kind of pool basin you have, for example. If you have a liner as opposed to a concrete basin, or perhaps even a fiberglass. So there's lots of things to consider. What about HR? Where's your staff from last year? Are they still available? Okay, are you reviewing your cleaning standards? Are you getting yourself in a position to get your staff trained when they come back? Programs, you may want to look at developing a few scenarios that can fit into a short time span. Maybe the season will only be 4 weeks this year, or maybe it's 6 weeks. Okay, but start planning for a new way to operate. Okay, and training will be very important. Not only are you worried about water safety, but there's some other things to consider as well. It's a good time to inspect those filters. Perhaps they haven't been open in 10 years, so maybe it's time to open those filters up. Look inside. So look at this as an opportunity right now to maybe look at those things that don't get the attention they may get on an annual basis. So some more ideas. Okay, contact your local health authority inspector. Give them an update, give him or her an update. Communicate with them. And again, get ready for a COVID-19 plan. Okay, start with your health authority inspector. Start to look at things like, capacity in the pool. What is it going to look like? What's the budget impact? Would you open your whirlpool, for example? Well, these are some of the things that you can start to consider now. Start to log your activities, okay, that are taking place at the pool. Make sure you know what maintenance is being done. Timing, this is critical. How long does it take your pool to go from filling to swimming? And make sure the decision makers know that. It's not like taking a bath where you fill your bathtub and jump right in. Okay, by the time you fill a pool and get the water ready for swimming, it can take, as you know, days, if not sometimes weeks. So the timeliness for our decisions are vitally important. And remember, if you don't open your pool, that's fine. You just may not have time. Okay, but our goal is to be ready to open our pool. Okay, but you have lots of challenges ahead. The next facility is spray and splash pads, and they're closed under phase 4 as well, even though not specifically mentioned. Okay, but again, it's important to communicate. You may want to post some signage at your spray pad. Okay, but again, we're aiming for a state of readiness. And what are some of the things that can be done now? Well, we can make sure all the equipment is operational and in good condition and make any repairs if necessary. We can start a log and we can make sure that it's documented. We can look at COVID changes. We can review our operational plans to see what needs to be changed to comply. Cleaning and disinfecting, social distancing, signage, hours of operation, and of course, making sure our staff are trained. So there's lots to do, okay? But I think it's important that we look at the cleaning and disinfecting, the signage and so forth. Playgrounds. There's certainly a little bit of varying opinions on playgrounds and where they stand currently, okay? They're specifically mentioned in phase 4. And again, we're trying to aim for a state of readiness, so when we reach phase 4, they're good to go. The equipment should be, again, operational. Okay, make any repairs that are necessary. We should be inspecting them regularly as well and making sure that we log that. A COVID change, what are the expectations of moving forward with our playgrounds? Will the public expect them to be disinfected and cleaned on a regular basis? And how would we manage that? And what does that look like environmentally as well? Again, start reviewing your operational plans to see what needs to be changed. Okay, again, cleaning and disinfecting, social distancing, what sort of signage would you want, hours of operation, etc. And again, remember the training that needs to take place with your teams. Next facilities are parks and open spaces. Again, they're closed for the most part under phase 4. And again, we're aiming for that state of readiness. Some ideas would include routine maintenance still needs to take place, so you still have to mow and trim the grass. Again, make sure you're logging everything. The COVID change here would be, again, review your operational plans to see what needs to be changed to comply. Cleaning and disinfecting, social distancing, signage, hours of operation. And again, remember that training. A challenge here would be, how do you regularly disinfect things like benches, garbage cans, etc.? That might be where the public expectations will land in our new normal. And as far as parks and open spaces are concerned, Andrew Exelby is a consultant of parks and open spaces with SPRA, so he's a good resource too to reach out to. Sports fields, they're currently closed as well, and they fall under phase 4. Again, it's important to communicate and put signage if you can. Some of the ideas that should be considered, again, that routine maintenance still needs to take place. You should be inspecting them regularly to make sure your facilities are safe. The COVID change here, again, review your operational plan, see what needs to be changed to comply with COVID. Cleaning and disinfecting, social distancing, signage, hours of operation. And again, remember the importance of training. Couple of ideas here for sports fields. Let's say it's a ballpark. How often do you clean and disinfect the dugouts and bleachers? Okay, something to consider moving forward. And something that comes to my mind too is, what do you do with sunflower seeds, spits? They're as common as baseballs and bats on a ball field. So how do you manage that kind of situation? And I think I read the other day about the Major League Baseball, and they have a 60 some odd page list of requirements for the ball players in order to restart their season. So I can just imagine some of the things that they have to comply with. Skateparks is the next facility, and again, falling under phase 4. Communication and signage, very key. And again, you're aiming for that state of readiness. Routine maintenance should still take place. Inspect for safety. COVID changes would be, again, look at your operational plan to see what needs to be changed to comply. Cleaning and disinfecting, social distancing, signage, hours of operation. And again, whatever changes you make, just make sure everybody's trained on it. And one thing I saw probably a week or so ago, one community filled their skate park with sand in hopes of discouraging the skateboarders. Well, it did that, but the dirt bikers showed up next. So who would have thought, where you had one solution caused another quandary. Next facilities, tennis and basketball courts. Again, falling under phase 4. It's not clear, but most likely. Again, communication and signage could be key at this particular point in time. And again, you're aiming for that state of readiness. So you're doing your routine maintenance, you're expecting for safety on a regular basis. And again, be prepared for a COVID change. If you're encouraging casual use, or if you're turning a blind eye to some of these facilities that are being used, they're running counter to the Re-Open Plan. So you do run the risk of increased liability and exposure. So it's something you may want to, again, seek the opinion from your insurer or even a legal opinion. I'll briefly talk about recreation programs, because what's facilities without programs? So again, they seem to fall under phase 4. And again, we don't have a date. Communication and signage are key. But again, you're aiming for that state of readiness. Okay. COVID change here would be full review of existing and new programs to determine impact by the COVID restrictions. Okay, how do you maintain social distancing and all those things that are required? Okay, you should be looking at what scenarios make sense. What's the financial impact? And you should be communicating these things with decision makers. Very important. COVID changes here again. Review your operational plans and see what needs to be changed to comply. Again, cleaning and disinfecting is certainly one, social distancing, signage, etc. Perhaps a big one on the horizon is indoor recreation facilities, and of course they're a key when we're getting into the winter season. Okay, arenas, curling rinks, etc. fall under phase 4. And again, what we're trying to do is get to that state of readiness. So when phase 4 is opened up, we're in a pretty good position. Question is, were your recreation facilities properly shut down at the end of the season? It was sort of a quick end for the most part, and were things shut down and put to bed properly for the summer season? Okay, good question. You may have to go back and look at some of that. Routine maintenance, yeah, still needs to take place. So if you're still doing some building repairs, it's something that you can still do during this downtime. Inspect your buildings regularly and log them for safety. And again, be ready for those COVID changes. Okay, time is on your side right now, so again, start thinking and planning. What is the winter season going to look like? A U.S. example I heard the other day is with respect to an arena facility that one rink in particular was not going to allow users to access dressing rooms. So everyone would have to come to the rink basically dressed and ready to participate. I couldn't confirm that anywhere, so maybe that is some misinformation. I honestly don't know, but it's something to consider as we move forward. Yesterday, I received an email as well from a rink in our province, and they've done a really good job as far as looking at some changes that would have to take place to accommodate COVID. And they're talking about social distancing signs in the arena. They're talking about levels of participants and coaches. They're talking about making sure that there's pylons on the ice for some of the practices where people will maintain their social distancing, having water bottles with individual names on it and things like that. So they're taking a very proactive stance right now. So I give that rink facility high marks for trying to put some things in place right now in anticipation. Poll question number 4. So if you don't mind, can you take a minute and just answer this question? With the information that is available to you today, will you be ready to reopen your indoor recreation facilities by September or October?
Hey, Tim, while people are answering the poll, I just want to say thank you to everyone. It looks like we have a very attentive audience today, and people are very engaged. They've been answering the poll questions, so thanks, everyone. I'm just going to close that poll in 15 seconds. And Tim, it looks like 77% of those who answered said yes, and 23% said no.
Thanks, Christian. Well, that's fairly strong results. It was a little bit higher than I thought, because I know there's still, again, a lot of questions out there, and there's not always enough answers at this particular point. So it's good to see that there's information available and that you're being proactive as well. I'm going to move on and just show you where you can find some resources that may help with this journey. has a lot of information. You may have to drill down a little bit to find it, but it's there. And some of the things they talk about is the COVID-19 workplace information. And there's three things that caught my attention. One is general workplace information. And again, it's a lot listed there. The second one, infection and personal protective equipment, a good resource. Again, try to go through it and see what great ideas you can pull from there. There's worker health and preventative measures section. And again, read through that and pull out information that you think will be of benefit. There's also a section on environmental cleaning and disinfection guidelines. And it's broken down in the following headings. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? Is there a difference between cleaning and disinfecting? There sure is. And how do I make a disinfecting solution? So some great resources there. So please take time out of your busy schedule, I appreciate, and make sure you look through those resources. The Health Authority is another, regulatory agency that has some information. So it's good to check out their website. SPRA, again, we try to provide as much information as we can to our members. So again, you should be checking our information out on a regular basis, and perhaps at the conclusion, Christian can talk a little bit about, our newsletter and other social media opportunities to stay informed. The National Collaborating Center for Environmental Health, and these organizations sort of come out of nowhere, but they have some really great resources on this website as well. So you can check them out just to see, again, if information housed there is of benefit. The Government of Canada also has a lot of information on their website as well, and there's a link to it. I'm going to mention the National Parks and Recreation Association in the US. They're equivalent to our CPRA, and they have a lot of interesting information. They're a large organization, as you can appreciate, with great number of resources and capacity. So they're putting out some great information that's useful to our industry as well. There's an interesting article on the future of youth sports that's worth a read. It gives a different opinion on what youth sport may look like in the future. Okay, it may be more applicable to larger centers, but it is an interesting read. CPRA, okay, so our Canadian Parks and Recreation Association has created a new shared folder for COVID-19 resources for the parks and recreation sector. So make sure you go to their website and check it out. Okay, they're working on several things right now, and one document is risk mitigation resource to help inform management of outdoor spaces, and it's soon to be released. Okay, so make sure you go to their Google Drive and look to see what information you can pull. They have it by categories, like, from my recollection, aquatics, arenas, and so forth. So they have it broken down. Again, the National Parks and Recreation Association, again, they have a lot of good information there. There's also good information being gathered and presented by governing bodies, and Life Saving Society would be an example. Red Cross, I know in my conversations with Hockey Canada, they're trying to put together information that will be helpful to all the, not only national level, but provincial levels as well. But remember the bold comment at the bottom. As owner, we're ultimately responsible, and it's your facility. So again, if a governing body says something one way, it's really up to you to determine if that's the best way, okay? Or if you have another way of looking at doing business. Here's a chart. Again, it's available from NRPA, and it's assessing the risk of spaces, facilities, and programs. And it's a nice little document that outlines different categories and also, again, the risk associated with them. So again, it's worth having a look at. There's sort of a larger version of it, and it covers everything from pools and parks and gyms to childcare facilities and contact sports, etc. So again, it's a good resource to look at. Just recently, and this would be last week, the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association has released this document, and it's called Recreation Facility COVID-19, Re-Entering and Reopening, Guiding Principles and Best Practices. And it's about a 40-plus page document. And again, it's chock full of different ideas on how to reopen our recreation facilities in the post-COVID period. So again, very worthwhile to have a read. Another document that's sort of hot off the presses, and maybe it's so hot that it's still to be released, but the Life Saving Society, our Saskatchewan branch, has put together a document, and it's well over 50 pages. And again, it talks about, the aquatic facility and the aquatic programming and how it would look like in a post COVID-19 situation. So I got sort of a sneak peek to it late last week, and I think Shelby and her team really, deserve a lot of credit for putting this together. So it's something, again, you may want to reach out to the Life Saving Society as a affiliate to make sure you get a copy of this document. So a few cautions to consider. Well, let's go through them. So again, most authority experts suggest there will be another wave in the fall to coincide with the cold and flu season. So that's something that you want to factor into future plans. When in doubt, it's my thought you should err on the side of safety, both public and employee. User groups should have a COVID-19 plan, and that might be difficult for some, but they should be thinking about it. They have some responsibility and onus as well. Okay, so a minor hockey group might be an organization that puts together something, and it might be another group. Perhaps it's a curling association that may not put something together, but they should be. Contractors, okay, contractors have a responsibility as well to make sure that their COVID-19, they have a plan and that they're following their plan. So if you have electricians coming into your building or refrigeration companies, you should be asking them for what is their plan. Information is changing minute to minute, and staying up to date can be difficult, but you need to try. Reach out, share information, share your challenges and solutions. Okay, also within and across our industry. Networking has never been as important as it is now. Okay, so make sure you network, and the districts are doing a really good job of doing that. No one has all the answers, but help is on the way as much as possible. There's a lot of different organizations that have a stake in the outcome, and they're doing their best to get us the information and the answers we need. Be prepared for a possible stimulus funding package for recreation organizations, facilities, and programs as we get into a post-COVID timeline. Next, start planning for change. Be proactive. Is the mop and bucket up to the challenge? And what I mean by that is, most of our facilities we clean by a mop and bucket. So what we're basically taking is a solution and smearing it all over the place. Is it time to look at something like an automatic scrubber? Okay, is that mop and bucket going from cleaning washrooms and dressing rooms to cleaning a kitchen? Possibly. So it's time for us to look at those old ways of doing business because we need to change. Environmental service versus a custodian or janitor. I think we have a new appreciation of the work that's required. As a facility operator, yes, you might be looking after your facility and flooding ice, once an hour, for example. But the environmental side of what we do is very, very important. And I'm sure you've seen lots of examples on the news where, people are running behind cleaning surfaces as fast as people touch them. That's environmental service, and that's very important. For one thing to keep in mind is that facility operator that's working by themselves. Is that one person able to look after the facility and also provide a higher level of environmental service and cleaning? Something to keep in mind. Workplace-specific policies and practices. You may have to do a job hazard analysis to see what the impact is going to be on your organization. Legal and insurance ramification. What's the level of service, and is it clearly defined? Okay, something to keep in mind, because that might be your only fallback position if you find yourself in a legal situation. Suppliers and supply chain issues. There might be challenges there beyond your control, but it's important that you start having those conversations with those suppliers to find out, if we need PPE, are you able to provide it? And how soon can you have it on my doorstep? Those are the kind of things that you need to have some conversations. Business plan. What's your business plan going to look like in the new normal? How about your emergency management plan? You know, do you have these? And if so, are they updated? Perhaps a key bullet is the last one here. Don't open unless you're ready. Okay, and you may want to think about a slow rollout. So when we reach phase 4 and we're starting to open our outdoor pools, do you put together a full program right off the hop, or do you have a slow rollout where you can modify your program as required? Okay, because at the end of the day, this is maybe the most important question, is would you want your family to participate in your facility and programs the way they're currently being offered? Okay, if you're hesitant at all, then there's probably some things that you need to reconsider. A bottom line, what is your standard of care and the level of service? Those are conversations you need to have with council and perhaps your board. Okay, and is it written down and has it been approved? These are some key considerations that may help you avoid any type of legal or insurance ramifications. What is the financial impact of moving forward? And there's probably going to be several, not only on a revenue side, but also on an expenditure side. So what's our end goal? Well, here's a couple of comments that came from SPRA members. How can we ensure the public feels safe in participating in recreation again? Well, we're going to have to make changes to our operations and our programs, and we need to communicate those changes to the decision makers and also the stakeholders. The next question is, running a program that doesn't match the tried and true beloved camp experience worth running if we can't deliver on those expectations? My answer to that is, well, maybe it was time for a change. Maybe, again, we can find the silver lining through this, and that the new normal will be a positive experience. Okay, and again, create a new normal. You know, are we able to meet the public expectations in the post-COVID period? This quote, I can't tell you where it came from, but it was brought to my attention, and it's worth considering. It's a combination of self-ownership, public responsibility, and self-policing. People need space to get out, get fresh air, and clear their minds. The optimist in me wants to say this is possible, but it really comes down to taking personal responsibility and having plans in place to monitor and enforce and educating the public about the importance of it. So that's what it boils down to, the self-ownership, the public responsibility, and self-policing. This is our last poll question, so if you can take a minute and just give us your feedback now. Was this presentation useful? Yes, yes, but need more specifics. Guidance, or no. So Christian, if you can share those results once they're in, that'd be great.
Sure, I'm going to close the poll in just about 5 seconds. So get your votes in. So it looks like 55% said yes, Tim. 41% said yes, but I need more specifics and guidance, and only 4% said no. So thank you very much for your honest feedback, everyone.
And certainly I was expecting that, because again, some of the information in this presentation is helpful, but yeah, the more specific we can be moving forward, and more guidance we can offer, that'll be important for our industry. But again, recognize the fact that it's unlikely that things will be spoon-fed. You'll have to do some of the legwork and such on your own. But again, as the province rolls out phase 4, there should be a number of different guidelines to follow. That'll certainly be helpful to our industry. So at this particular point, the presentation is complete, so I do appreciate your sticking with me for a little bit more than an hour, and we're prepared to sort of take your questions.
Hey, Tim. So I've got a number of questions that have been asked throughout the webinar, if I can share those with you.
Sure.
So let's see, let's start with Bobby, who asked the question. You had indicated you were going to provide some more clarity back to us on camps, and if multipurpose spaces is part of phase 3, how will you communicate that back to us?
Well, my best response to that type of question is, again, it'll be up to the province to provide us some feedback with respect to new guidelines for phase 3. And they've indicated that on the website as well, that phase 3 will take effect unless there's other ramifications on June the 8th, and that there's be more information to follow. So I'd be hopeful that the province will be able to give us further direction on what it means, like from a camp perspective, for example. Okay, so I hope that answers the question. I don't have anything specific. It's sort of a waiting game as well for SPRA. It's important that everyone realizes that our CEO, Todd Schaefer, is in regular contact with the ministry, and they look to SPRA for some guidance and advice on things like this. So your questions are very important, and we may not get a chance to answer all the questions in the time we have left, but the questions will be documented, and with Todd's help, they'll be given to the ministry for consideration.
Yeah, and I think I can add a little bit to that. So as you mentioned, Tim, we have a newsletter, Parks and Recreation Connection, which we send out typically on a bi-weekly schedule, but we've been increasing in frequency lately to try and keep up with the flow of information that's coming in. So you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we're posting more information on Facebook as it comes in. We also have a members Facebook group, so if you visit our Facebook page, you can join our group, and we'll share information directly to our members in that group as well. We also have a series of webinars coming up this June. They'll be happening every Tuesday throughout the month of June under the Navigating the New Normal series heading. And these are going to be a series of panel discussions with people from across the recreation industry throughout Saskatchewan. And it'll be discussions on exactly what we're talking about today. How are we reacting to COVID-19 and these recovery phases as they change and continue to impact our industry? The other thing I can share is that SPRA is working on a reopening best practices document to share with government in the coming weeks that is specific to phase 4. And that document is being created through a combination of gathering local, national, and North American information.
Thanks, Christian. Again, communication between peers and colleagues and such is very important. So those are some great examples of how we can still stay in touch, and that there's further, information sharing through the panel discussions. That's great.
We had a suggestion or a request from Warren, who mentions that user groups, i.e. renters of municipal facilities, may have their own safe restart guidelines for their specific activity. And he would encourage facility operators to ask for or seek out user groups' specific plans and work with those user groups to find common ground. For example, soccer leagues, Soccer Canada and Sask Soccer are all developing detailed guidelines for all soccer organizations on the safe return to playing soccer. Soccer leagues use municipal fields. Hopefully the municipality and local soccer leagues will be in direct communications to ensure municipal guidelines and soccer guidelines align.
Yeah, I would agree with Warren. He makes a good point there, that all these organizations are working on plans, and it's important for them to share the plans with, you know, the owners and operators of the facilities. So if you need to, reach out to your organizations and find out what the status is. You know, I know minor baseball is working on some, soccer is working on others, as Warren notes. So there's a lot of organizations that are putting plans in place. Just make sure you're part of that conversation. And again, ultimately, it's your facility. So it's up to you to determine if all those steps that they have in place are enough, or if you require more. Something to bear in mind.
Michael asks, it's our understanding that there are no public health orders. Oh, sorry, this is a, yes. So Michael is asking, it's our understanding that there are no public health orders mandating the closure of things like playgrounds and spray parks, although the Re-Open Plan mentions them. We have been informed by public health that although listed in the phase Re-Open Plan, it is ultimately the municipality's decision as to when they are reopened. Does SPRA have any idea why there's a contradiction? So I actually received an answer to this from our CEO, Todd Schaefer, and he had mentioned that we are asking that same question to the ministry, and they're noting that there's been some confusion between provincial park guidelines and those parks with municipalities. Actually, Michael,
I would agree with.
Sorry, Todd, or sorry, Tim.
Yeah, I would agree with Michael. On some of these items, there seems to be a little confusion, perhaps inconsistency. Okay, but on phase 4, there's a pretty good list of what facilities are included. In phase 4, it talks specifically about playgrounds. Okay, so again, it may be something that, yeah, there needs to be further clarification on, but I would also look to your insurers and potentially legal for an opinion at this particular point in time. Because if you're not following the guidelines and there's a situation at your facility, again, it may increase your exposure to risk and liability.
Tim, Laura asks, where do competitive sports fall? For example, swimming or diving teams that want to start a small group of maybe 10 social distancing or doing outdoor dry land training?
I think that's a great question that Laura asked, and I think we need further information specific on that. The Life Saving Society and that document that was referred to a few slides ago may provide some clues as well. So you may want to reach out to organizations like that to get their thoughts and feelings. At this particular point in time, I would suggest that pool facilities would be closed and would be opened under phase 4. Okay, so again, I think it's important that, you know, groups are talking about, you know, what changes that they'll make to be able to offer programs in the near future. So I think that's a great step forward, but at this particular point in time, I don't think there's anything more concrete or guidelines out there. But I'm glad the conversations are taking place in the background, if nothing else. So again, reach out to organizations, the health authority, you know, contact them to see if they have any new information that they can share, and keep watching for provincial guidelines that'll help direct us as well.
Tim, I have another comment I have a comment from Darcy, who just mentions, don't forget to stay connected to your local public health officials to ensure they don't come in and shut you down. They're trying to keep up with all of the changes as well.
Yeah, and I think Darcy makes a good observation there. They're key people in this whole process. So again, stay in communication with them, find out what's going on. They may be able to give you some inside information to some degree as things start coming down the pipe with new guidelines. So yeah, your public health officials, make sure you're reaching out to them, you're finding out who they are, you know, when can they come and maybe you know, come to your facilities, what information do they have any posters that they can possibly provide you that you can print off, those kind of things. So yeah, they're a great resource, so make sure you don't leave them on the sideline. Make sure you involve them.
Jody asks, are you aware of municipalities or facilities working together from various communities, or are they working independently on reopen plans?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I've heard too much about communities working together, but I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, from what I've seen, districts are encouraging that type of networking to take place. And I'm sure there's, many thoughts being shared around those type of roundtables. So if communities can work together, it makes some sense. Again, what you're seeing at the CPRA level, they're trying to, consolidate a lot of information as well. And that almost can provide a national perspective on some of this. So I would certainly encourage communities to reach out to one another, talk about their challenges and solutions and best practices. I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, don't be afraid to reach outside of your local region to a similar community, half a province away. See what they're doing. Because again, we're all in that same boat. We all need to row in the same direction.
I have another question from Michael, who asks, as we look ahead to the potential reopening of our facilities in the upcoming phases, not only are we looking at it from a safety perspective, but also from a financial perspective. For example, we are having to determine if the financial cost to open the facilities back up with the anticipated restrictions in place in phase 3 and 4 may not be fiscally prudent. Has there been any discussions with the provincial government on providing incentives or cost sharing for municipalities to open up our facilities when permitted to do so?
Again, another great question, and I think those are the questions that SPRA is taking away from conversations like this and presenting to the ministry. I'm certainly not aware of any type of financial incentives or anything like that at this point, but the financial impact moving forward is something that, communities, municipalities, agencies, boards, etc., need to consider, because there will be change, and it's important to sort of get a handle on that. Revenues will be impacted, expenditures will be impacted as well. So it's really important to get a handle on some of those things, because as I suggested in that example, the mop and the bucket are not your best cleaning procedures moving forward. So if you have to buy a automatic scrubber, for example, what's the cost of that, and how do you budget for it? Another example would be, is a 4-week outdoor pool season financially prudent? Those are the type of conversations you need to have. What will revenue look like, for an outdoor pool, for example, that's only open for 4 weeks? Will people swarm back to the pool, or will there be cautious attendance? I don't know. But those are some of the conversations that you need to have.
Tim, I can also add that I've received a message from our CEO, Todd Schaefer, that SPRA has been in regular discussions with the ministry on support for municipal recreation from a financial perspective.
Perfect.
Let's see here. Krista asks, hi, will this recording be emailed out? I missed the first half. Yes, this recording will be sent out by email within a few days to everybody who's attending as well. The slides will be made available on our website.
Well, that's too bad, because Chris missed the fun of the first half.
Let's see. Elizabeth has a suggestion, perhaps another webinar when more guidelines are released that helps to interpret some of the information and or provides examples of the ways best practices are being implemented.
Yeah, Elizabeth makes a good point. It'd be nice if we could do a follow-up to this presentation, and maybe there's several, but you did talk about the panel discussions that are coming up in the month of June. So there's an opportunity to learn more through those panel discussions as well.
Yes, and those panels, we have a newsletter that's going to be sent out later this afternoon that will include a registration link to the first panel that's happening at 11 a.m. next Tuesday, and that event will also be made available to register on our website. Let me see. Tim, Chelsea asks, have you heard of any municipalities that have made the decision to not open summer programs or pools?
Yes, I have, but not necessarily from this province. I know there's been decisions made in Ontario, for example, where summer camps will not be open and outdoor pools will not be open. But I can't say I'm familiar with those type of decisions being made in Saskatchewan. I'm not sure if you've heard of anything, Christian, or not, but I haven't heard anything that final or concrete at this point.
No, I can't say that I can add anything to that. We had one question come in from Megan who asked, how do I access the members Facebook group? So in order to access our special Facebook group, you have to go to our Facebook page, and then on the left-hand side of our main page, you'll see like a little menu that says home, about, events, posts, photos, and more. There's a little, you'll see the word groups. If you click on groups, it'll take you to a page and you'll see SPRA member community. Just click on that link to the SPRA member community and you will be able to ask to join the group. You can also find it by going to facebook.com/groups/Saskparks and Rec. And it looks like I've got a couple invites or asks to join coming in right now. So I see that people are finding it. Related to the last question there about closing, Tim, Jamie mentions that many municipalities have canceled, such as Wynyard, Wadena, Kamsack, and Langenburg.
Thanks, Jamie, for that update. I'm sure other communities will be facing that challenge as well. You know, do you open or do you close?
Let's see. Okay, I have one more question from Michael, and he asks, has the government provided any detail on when more information will come out about indoor recreation facility reopening guidelines so that we're able to proactively plan on reopening things like aquatic centers and arenas? And I did get an answer to that from Todd, who mentions that there have been no indications from government on when they will release guidelines for phase 4. However, we've continued to emphasize the importance of providing advance notice to municipalities in order to be prepared for opening recreation facilities.
Yeah, again, Michael makes a good point there. We can't have an announcement on a Friday about facilities being open for Monday. We're very sensitive to that. We understand that. As Todd has indicated, we've made that clear with the province as well, that there needs to be some suitable time to reboot and get our facilities up and running. That's why throughout the presentation, you know, we should be getting ready in the background. We should be getting things done from an operational point of view, from a policy point of view, from a procedural point of view. So, you know, when the time comes, we're pretty much ready to open the doors. Okay, so you've been in contact with your cleaning supply company, for example. Make sure you have enough hand sanitizer, things like that. So again, there's things we can do in anticipation, but at this particular point, we don't have any concrete dates to share with you. The government is aware that there is some lead time that's required. Okay, so each facility is different. An arena facility, for example, it may take several days to make ice. It might take several weeks to make ice. So again, if arenas are going to open by a certain date, we need to make sure that we're given that lead time.
Okay, Tim, so I think that's all. We're running out of time. So I think we're going to close the Q&A now, but thank you everyone for your engagement and for your questions.
And thank you from me, and you know how to contact me if you need some more information.
All right, thank you everyone. Have a great day.